With the ability to travel all of time and space, the Doctor makes frequent trips to the past, where, by what we must assume is coincidence, they frequently encounter famous historical figures. And of these well-known people, many are known for the creative works they produce. Yet in these encounters, there appears to be a trend of the creative's works being merely derivative of their experience with the Doctor. Firstly is the novelist Agatha Christie, who the Doctor and Donna met when travelling back to the 1920s. The adventure took on the format of a murder mystery. However, this is not a case of Christie using the events of the adventure to inspire her writing, as at the point the story is set, she's already an established writer. Instead, the antagonist is revealed to be acting like the villain in this style of novel because he'd been reading the works of Agatha Christie. Though, during the course of the adventure, Donna mentions Miss Marple and describes the premise of the novels that feature her. Since this is a character that Christie had yet to write about, Donna seeds the idea that would become the basis of the Miss Marple novels. A key part of the novel, A Death in the Clouds, is the sting of a wasp, which the Doctor points out as being inspired by the Vespiform, as its appearance resembles that of a giant wasp. Spoilers for a novel that's now in its 10th decade, but Donna reveals that in Murder on the Orient Express, that everyone was responsible for the murder. But as this was 8 years before Christie wrote the novel, it seems likely that this idea also influenced her writing. Of course, by the end of the story, Christie ends up linked to the mind of the dying Vespiform, leading her to forgetting everything that happened. With the adventure she spent with the Doctor only lingering in the back of her mind, she ended up using the ideas entirely unintentionally, meaning that Doctor Who still presents her as having more ideas than many other creatives encountered by the Doctor. This next creative didn't even need to meet the Doctor to have his lack of imagination revealed. During the events of the 10th Doctor novel, Forever Autumn, the Doctor puts on a Jar Jar Binks rucksack, which Martha laughs at, of course, causing the Doctor to reveal that Jar Jar is in fact a real character in the Doctor Who universe, and that Jar Jar appeared to George Lucas in the form of a telepathic message that Lucas thought was just something he imagined. This led to the inclusion of fan-favourite character Jar Jar Binks in The Phantom Menace. The novel isn't particularly clear if this is the only part of Star Wars that was telepathically communicated to Lucas, however the Doctor does also claim that Lucas was way off the mark for some of the stuff in Episode 9. So either the Doctor wasn't aware that Lucas didn't write the 9th instalment of the saga, or in the Doctor Who timeline, Lucas did write the film, but it still ended up being of similar quality. I'm also not choosing to consider the implications of there being shared actors between Doctor Who and Star Wars, given the latter does exist as films in the Doctor Who universe. While George Lucas is only mentioned briefly in all of Doctor Who, he's mostly included to show him as a creative hack, not even able to come up with the legendary Jar Jar Binks. In another 10th Doctor story, The Shakespeare Code, the Doctor and Martha meet the titular playwright, at the same time that three witch-like figures attempt to bring back the rest of their kind. Just as in William Shakespeare's play Macbeth, there are three witches who prophesy that Macbeth shall become king. This isn't the only Shakespearean witch that was inspired by the events caused by the Carrier Knights. Sycorax is the name of a powerful witch mentioned in The Tempest. And in the Shakespeare Code, Shakespeare hears the Doctor say Sycorax when talking about an animal skull, and decides to steal the name for his play. Shakespeare is first seen in The Chase, when the Doctor and his companions spy on him with their new space-time telly. During this brief glimpse into his life, two different characters give him ideas about what to write his plays about. Queen Elizabeth gives him the idea for The Merry Wives of Windsor, while Francis Bacon suggests doing a play about Hamlet. While in a short story published in the Doctor Who magazine, Shakespeare mentions that Sarah Jane also suggested that he write a play featuring Lady Macbeth. This short story also features the Doctor's most blatant meddling with the historic creative's work, as he tells Shakespeare that he can't include Take Arms Against the Sea of Troubles in his play, as it is a mixed metaphor. However, in this instance, Shakespeare doesn't take the original idea on board, and actually sticks to the original line. When travelling to Villa Diodati on the night Mary Shelley was inspired to write Frankenstein, the Doctor is clear to her companions they should not interfere in any way, and they shouldn't even mention the word Frankenstein. This seems to go well until, for what appears to be a flash of lightning, Ashad the lone Cyberman makes his way into the building. Ashad's body is a patchwork of different Cybermen, with a gap in his faceplate making his undead nature evident. Shelley even speculates that he's a composite of other men, and refers to his creator as the modern Prometheus. Clearly the idea behind her novel came directly from meeting Ashad. Though, this isn't the only story that claimed to show how Mary Shelley got this idea. As in a comic, she sees what looks like a man covered in bandages being zapped by lightning. He is unable to speak properly, only saying something that sounds vaguely like the name Frankenstein. After she faints, it is revealed that this figure was in fact an alien, using the energy to recharge. And in a Big Finish audio, there is a different explanation for the name Frankenstein. Because the Doctor arrives during the story writing competition at Villa Diodati, but for some reason referring to himself as Dr. Frankenstein. When he appears to die, Percy Shelley decides to experiment on this person he only just met using lightning. This manages to revive the Doctor and leads to Percy calling himself the modern Prometheus. So if you choose to believe this account of events, then Mary Shelley seems to have come up with no ideas on her own. This account also leads to her travelling with the Doctor as a companion, as that's just how expanded media is. This creative is probably the biggest fraud of them all, and I'm not just saying that because I find him annoying. When tracking down a victim of the Time Lash, the Doctor meets a man called Herbert, and after they go to the planet Carfel and do some sci-fi shenanigans which stop the Boran from doing whatever evil stuff he was planning, does Herbert reveal he is H.G. Wells from a few years before he had published any of his novels. The most obvious inspiration that he draws from this encounter comes from the TARDIS, as Wells is eager to learn more about it when the Doctor reveals this machine that can travel through time. This seems to be the idea that caused him to write The Time Machine, a novel that also features subterranean creatures called Morlocks, just as under the city on Carfel lived the Morlocks, spelled with an X. Even the Borand being a hybrid of Quarflin and Morlocks is likely to have inspired Wells when writing The Island of Dr. Moreau, a novel that features a mad scientist creating hybrid beings. In the audio story The Ghosts of N-Space, the Doctor says that he let Wells use an ion-fusing coil to do an invisibility experiment. This experiment would presumably lead to Wells writing The Invisible Man, so this means that the Doctor directly led to him being inspired for the basis of the novel. Did H.G. Wells have any original ideas in the Doctor Who universe? In stories that claim to celebrate the works of authors, the show often ends up presenting these creatives as not coming up with the very ideas the stories are there to celebrate. This appears to mostly be the byproduct of stories incorporating ideas from the real-life creatives' works, and by having these historical figures interacting with their ideas, it frequently suggests that they did not come up with them themselves, though it could be argued that the point of the stories is the ideas themselves were not why these people were thought worth celebrating, but instead their ability to execute the concepts. After all, anyone can meet a giant space wasp, but only Agatha Christie could turn it into a bestseller. This list was by no means exhaustive, so feel free to comment below if you know any other examples or just want to tell me that weird dream you had.